Hi, everybody, and welcome to Season 2.
Is there any kind of Season 2 music? It's sort of like Indiana Jones meets Carousel.
I know, it was like I started singing, and I thought, this sounds like Indiana Jones, but I don't want to copy it exactly. So I just let my instincts take over.
Wow, it's amazing.
Can we play that every time?
Let's not.
This season, we're changing things up a little bit. Our first 14 episodes featured friends of mine from my experience in the music industry. But this season, we're expanding beyond music into all walks of life. And while all of the episodes in Season 1 had obvious spiritual content, in Season 2, there will be some episodes where God doesn't specifically come up in the conversation, but we believe that everything is sacred when you take time to notice.
Yeah, you are going to hear the stories of the different guests this season, and we know you will recognize the way that God is working in the lives of our guests, whether they see it or not.
Our hope is that these episodes will inspire and remind you that there is beauty and meaning to be found in everyone's story, including your own.
So with that, let's get started with our episode.
I'm JJ Heller, and this is Instrumental, a show about the big and small moments that shape our lives. In every episode, my guest and I start near the end of their story and work our way back to the beginning. I hope our conversation reminds you that every second matters, because none of us knows which moment will be the one that changes everything. Hey everybody, it's JJ.
And her husband Dave.
And get ready, because the first episode of Season 2 is incredible.
I second that emotion.
Our guest, Heather Avis. Okay.
No.
Our guest, Heather Avis, inspired and challenged me to see the world differently after I read her book a couple years ago called The Lucky Few. Her story even inspired us earlier this year while we were writing my song, New Normal.
Yeah, I totally remember the songwriting process where we got verse 1 and the chorus down, and I started thinking like, I wonder where we should take this for verse 2. And I remembered Heather's story, and we somehow managed to get the lyric chromosome into verse 2 of that song.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So I'm pretty proud of it.
You might recognize Heather and her beautiful family since they've been featured in commercials for Walt Disney World and Red Robin, and they're also on the cover of her most recent book, Scoot Over and Make Some Room, which was on the shelves of Target stores. Her story is so good, you guys, that I don't want to give too much away. So let's just jump right in. Act 3, You're Welcome Here. After adopting her daughter Macy, Heather faced a kind of loneliness and isolation she wasn't expecting. Not one to be complacent for long, she began to build the community she and her family were longing for.
I remember the first time I saw a mom with a baby with Down syndrome, the similar age as Macy, and I was at a Panera Bread. And she was in line in front of me, and I spotted him. He was about 6 months older than Mason.
How old was Macy at the time?
She was under a year.
Okay, so babies.
Babies, yeah. She wasn't even on my hip yet. He was on his mom's hip. I remember that. They were babies. So Mason was probably 5 or 6 months old. He was probably a year. And I saw her and thought, how do I meet her? How do I see this woman? And I just kind of awkwardly made my way to her and pretended to bump into her. Cause I also didn't want to say, oh, your baby has Down syndrome, in case she's not happy about that, in case he doesn't. But I was 99% sure he did. But she saw me and saw Macy and said, oh my gosh, does she have Down syndrome? I said, yes, did your son? And then we ended up sharing a booth and exchanging numbers, and they are still very, very dear friends. But that led to, we went to our first thing called a buddy walk, which is put on by the National Down Syndrome Society, and they have them around the whole state. And it's a way to raise money for Down syndrome. And it was just my in-laws and one set of friends. There's no memo on how to do this right. We had like one little blanket, and the way that it was is every family has folding tables, full-on meals. They have like lots of pop-up tents, 20, 50, 100 people on their team, signs, matching t-shirts. I mean, we showed up like total amateur hour. And
just a ragtag group.
oh, we were just a little ragtag group. But then we met other parents. There were 2 other moms that day that similar age babies that we ended up connecting with. So that was my initial stepping into that community. It was a couple years later at a buddy walk, a year or so after Instagram had started. It was about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years now. And a friend of mine had started an Instagram account for her dog, who is a Chiweenie and has this like crazy underbite. And the dog's name is Tuna, and the account is Tuna Melts My Heart. Yeah, she has close to 2 million followers at this point. But in the beginning days, Instagram featured her, and she ended up with like 50,000 followers, which is still a lot of followers. But in those first couple years, that was an
big.
insane amount of followers. And she has a deep, deep love for Down syndrome. So she ends up saying to me at this buddy walk, Heather, you need to do an Instagram page with Mason, and just like, you know, a picture a day of Macy and raising her. And like, we need more people with Down syndrome in all these spaces so people can see what it's like. And so I did. And then she featured me on her account with her 50,000. And in a day, we got 12,000 followers from her posting. This is also when people engaged a lot more on Instagram.
And then how old was Macy at this point?
Like 4. And so that then all of a sudden people are following us and commenting on things, and our account just continued to grow after that. And in the years, it's just morphed into what was just like, hey, here's a picture of us doing what we're doing. It's morphed into a space for advocacy and for community and for learning and for teaching. And that's just opened up doors to meeting so many other parents through social media who have kids with Down syndrome who have become my good friends. So I'd say the majority of my very, very dear friends who have a loved one with Down syndrome, I've met through Instagram.
Wow.
And we've ended up working together or doing conferences together or family vacations. The community has gotten very large.
So when you saw that mom in Panera Bread with the baby with Down syndrome, were you surprised at the emotions that you felt when you saw her? Or had you been already aware of this desire to meet other moms who had Down syndrome babies?
I definitely wanted to meet other parents who were raising kids with Down syndrome. And I don't know. I don't remember if it surprised me. I felt very lonely often in my parenting journey with Macy in those early years because my friends just couldn't understand or relate. And it's very, very different raising a child with a disability. And then she was so sick, like we were at the doctor all the time. So when you're raising a kid who doesn't fit into the typical mold, it's super lonely. I think parenthood can just be lonely often, and people don't talk about that enough. When you have a sick kid and you're the only person in your friend group who has a sick kid, or when you have a kid with a disability and you're the only person in your friend group who has a kid with a disability, the day in and day out living is different for parents raising kids with disabilities and parents raising kids with illnesses. Then it feels isolating and lonely.
Well, and how beautiful that now you've built a community for other parents who probably feel isolated and lonely. And I mean, it's just like this space that says, you're welcome here. I understand. We're all in it together.
Totally. And that idea of the Me Too, it's just a really powerful statement. And I now host retreats for moms who have kids with Down syndrome. We do it twice a year. I partner with a friend of mine, and we have a retreat center that sleeps 26 people. And so we have 26 women who come from different places around the nation, some even from Canada, and everyone comes a stranger, and we go Thursday to Sunday, and everyone leaves best friends. But you kind of, within an hour, there's this sense of being known and understood, and with this similar journey of raising a child with Down syndrome. I think Instagram's incredibly problematic, and it's also brought me to where I am. So I have deep gratitude for it. It's also my biggest space in which I have opportunities to connect with others and to share my heart with others, and people hear me and I get to learn from people. So it's been a space for the last 8+ years that I've been trying to navigate in a way that's healthy. We had all our eggs in that basket, and Instagram is so fragile. Tomorrow it could be gone. And then what? Do we have an email list? Who are we talking to besides these people on Instagram? And as Instagram has grown, it has become less productive and more of a toxic space. I want out, but it's also my number one audience in terms of numbers. And then you guys know this kind of stuff. It's like you're doing the thing that you're passionate about, the thing that it is undeniable, even as I'm sharing the story with you guys, that the Lord has laid out a path and given me opportunities to get to where I am. And now we need to monetize it. It's gross to me. I don't like it. I just want to do the thing that God's laid out before me. But then you have to monetize it. And then you have Instagram who can help you monetize it. But then it becomes gross. I don't know. So yeah, we're still figuring out what we do. I don't know what I do. I say that every day, and Josh then gives me a list of things that I do, but
yeah, I mean, it's like, you want to advocate, but it's just the question of what does that look like and how do you do it?
Yeah.
Do any stories come to mind from families who have become a part of this community that you've built where it's made a difference in their lives?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that. So my husband also, to help my psyche these last few months, and he makes me screenshot comments and emails and things.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, I just had a woman reach out that said, so my mom's name is Honey and her grandma name is Honey Graham. And I know
that's amazing.
And this sweet grandma reached out and she said, I just want to let you know my kids just had a baby with Down syndrome, and I'm having my grandkids call me Honey Graham because it would be an honor to be at all like the woman who raised you. I mean, I get those kinds, where it's like, are you kidding me? Or the ones that get me the most, that really keep me going forward when I just want to quit it all and work at Starbucks is people who say, I have been following your account for years and I just got a Down syndrome diagnosis for my baby. And I'm so much less afraid because I know you and your family here on Instagram. I mean, that kind of stuff. Families who reach out who have chosen to adopt. I tell a story in my book, The Lucky Few, that actually in talking about Instagram, it was pivotal for me from going to just like, oh, this is a fun thing to, oh, this is something that I need to pursue in an intentional way. And this woman had commented on a picture to another woman like, hey, so-and-so, do you follow this account? And then the woman commented back in the thread and said, yes, this is why we're adopting Ruthie. Like, stopped me on my tracks, and I figured out how to get a hold of her. And once I got a hold of her, I said, can you tell me what this means exactly? And she said, yeah, we're actually in China right now adopting our daughter with Down syndrome because of your family. That's the reason we're doing this. It caught me off guard. And this was years and years ago. And I remember I was like crying, and then I went to tell my husband the story, and I couldn't tell him without getting choked up. And because I never started out with that goal, I was just going to share my kid on a space called Instagram. And then that God has used it to change people's lives in such a powerful way. That moment for me was pivotal. And it was, okay, what we're doing here is important. And let's be more intentional in this space.
Can you tell us anything about Josh?
Yes, I can. Josh is a creative. So he is an artistic, creative type, and he is an eternal optimist and the anchor, more like an anchor. He keeps us grounded as a family, brings us back to the thing that matters. That's what Josh is really good at. And he and I, because he works from home, we both work from home. and run this business together. We're also both equal partners in home and family life. So our roles are different than like your typical family. Mason is 12, so she is our preteen, and in every sense of the word, she is a preteen. Bless us all. Mason has a deep love for music and dance. Her life is music and dance. And so you will find her most days as her preteen self in her room listening to music and dancing. And she's our social girl. She loves people and wants to be with people all the time. Every morning she wakes up and says, what are we doing today? Who are we going to see? And then she's also our cautious girl. So she's the last to try something. If something looks scary or requires her to step outside of her comfort zone in any way, she's the last to do that. And then our middle daughter, Truly Star, she's our sweet and spicy girl. She's just brilliant and has a heart that beats for others. She's very in tune with everyone in the room and everything that's happening. I think she's going to be an entrepreneur. We call her our little world changer. Like every day she's got a plan on how to make a thing and sell a thing and do a thing. And she's like, today she's like, what if we just put a box in the front of the yard and we like ask for donations? You're like, okay, what are they for? It's always this like, and why do you want this money? And why are you selling things? And how are you selling this? She has big plans. Can you please just put this on YouTube? Like, honey, you don't have a YouTube, but okay. And she's the leader for sure. Since Mason's so cautious, Truly is like leads the crew. They do anything and everything she tells them. She is adored by her siblings. And she's super talented and gorgeous, and she's a rad kid. And then August is our son, and he is an introvert through and through and through. I mean, we've been joking during coronavirus, like this is his dream scenario. He's just
living his best life in his room. A couple of times we're in California. So like we've gone to the beaches, and halfway through the day, he's like, can we just go home? I'm like, oh my gosh, buddy. We just got here. Like, you're home all the time. So he adores his parents and his sisters. He adores his grandparents. So he's got like his group of people that he just loves with every ounce of who he is. And if you're not in the group, he's not super interested in who you are initially. You can get in, but he's got a certain capacity that he can give out in a day. And he's pretty aware of that, So he's one of the most imaginative kids I've ever known. And he plays with his toys, and he has like a handful of stuffed animal toys that are his go-tos. And they have full on like a world that I'm not a part of it, but they're all very good friends, and they have their relationships with each other and with him and he with them. And he talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and creates these incredible imaginative scenarios with his toys. He's one of the coolest kids I've ever known in my whole life. I know I'm biased. He's just such a cool kid. And also incredibly adorable.
His face is so cute. I didn't think I'd write a second book. I thought, this is my story. I've told it, which is so narrow-minded to think that we get this one story when we're living out a story is unfolding every day. And I had a moment on the freeway in LA where I thought, oh my gosh, this is what the next book is. And I just had been going through so much with Mason, especially as she's gotten older and going through the school district and in church and just living in a world where segregation is still very much supported and alive and well, especially in the disability community. And we were experiencing that everywhere we went. Every person who had interacted with Mason and people who I had known who had a child with a disability or people even had a disability, how much richer their lives were, right? That idea of success, how the lens in which they viewed the world and they viewed others was so much healthier and grounded and what I wanted and what I think humanity is striving for. So then my second book is more of a manifesto of like, hey guys, we are missing out on the goodness in humans and the best in ourselves because we are excluding people with disabilities and we're excluding people who are different than us in our lives. And so I talk about it with the school systems, with extracurricular, with church. I think the church has really missed the mark when it comes to inclusion and understanding the heart of God, because we don't allow people with disabilities who are image bearers of God to speak into our lives, because we've separated them and we don't create church spaces where they can belong fully as they are and where they're viewed as worthy members who have something to contribute, who have spiritual giftings. So I talk about that kind of stuff.
Well, that sounds amazing.
We are functioning within systems that are established that work for certain kinds of people. And the church is not exempt from that. And the church, I'll say like Big C church, I think some people understand what I mean when I say that. As a whole, the collective church idea, they're not exempt from that. We, because I'm a part of it, are not doing a lot to acknowledge it and therefore can't change it. So there are absolutely pockets and certain ministries that are really great. But if you're going to go to like the top 100 churches in America and you pop into one, chances are they have some kind of disability ministry, but it's not an inclusive ministry. It's a segregated space built on a foundation of we able-bodied neurotypical, our savior and hero would let us come save you and serve you. And that is not the heart of God, and it is not kingdom-minded. I think that it's that overall system that's an issue. Within the systems are incredible programs and incredible humans who have the right idea when it comes to disability. And I mean, the church we go to right now is just, it's wonderful. And my kids with Down syndrome are 100% included, and everyone bends and flex as needed. And they're seen as valuable members of the church body. And there's a lot of churches out there that exist like that.
This problem was not even on my radar. And I'm so thankful that she brought it to my attention. We have such a tendency to categorize and isolate. And while that keeps things neat and efficient, it can really limit how rich our experience is.
What it makes me think of is actually the beginning of your music career, when we tried to kind of isolate your talents and just have you go off and invent and create, and we were relying solely on you. And it was only when we invited more and more people into the process that your music became richer. And I think it's exactly that way with what Heather is talking about, that when we invite everyone into our lives, then we end up experiencing diversity and new ways of thinking and new ways of seeing the world.
That's right. I love what Heather is doing as she advocates for a more diverse community of friends and families in our schools, in our communities, and our churches.
Well, let's move on to Act 2. And in order to do that, we need to jump back in time about 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah. This was a time before Beyonce and Jay-Z were married.
Was there such a time?
No, can you believe it? Also, the Twilight movies weren't even a thing yet.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And people were just starting to hear about a website. It's a little one that's called the Facebook. I really didn't know if they were going to make it.
No, it's funny. I didn't either. I thought this is way worse than MySpace.
Well, yeah, they didn't have a music player in the platform. At the time, I don't even think Facebook allowed you to post video or even photos.
Oh.
Do you remember? All you would do is like poke someone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But it's funny because I have these fond memories of MySpace, but now that I think about it, it was fairly obnoxious. So it was like this like flashing glitter page with like kitty cats on it or whatever.
I just wanted to say I love you with this glitter kitty.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, while we were preoccupied about our move from MySpace to Facebook, Heather had much more important things on her mind. Let's hear her story.
Act 2, a front row seat to a miracle. As Heather and Josh began their adoption journey, they found themselves face to face with a series of decisions neither of them saw coming.
So when we started the adoption process, I just wanted control. And so I was holding tightly still to this idea of I want a healthy infant, preferably who resembles Josh and me in some way. Like however this baby would have come out of my womb, I want them to come to me through adoption. And when you do an adoption plan, you get paperwork, or part of the paperwork you fill out is a checklist of what you are willing to accept in a child and not, and even in a birth family history. And it's just this wild idea and thing to process through where it's like 6 pages long of things that you could think of, like gender, race, and then any sickness or disease that you've ever heard of, and then 100 that you haven't. I mean, it's just wild. And Josh and I are online, like Googling, like, what is this? What is this? And checking no to most of the boxes because we just wanted a healthy infant. And then who Mason was on paper was definitely not what our checklist reflected.
Then how did that happen, though? If the paperwork was submitted, is it like a social worker who called you?
Josh and I went on a trip out of the country for a couple of weeks. And this is like pre-smartphones. And I didn't hear from her. We didn't have internet for the first week of our trip. And then we got to a hotel with internet access and we turned on our computer and checked my email and there was a response from her. And then she just said things are super slow with the agency. We just had 2 babies with Down syndrome placed and we're looking for homes for them, which can always be hard for us. Your profile has been viewed once in the last week. Hang in there. I think that's almost word for word what it said. And I read it and I couldn't unread it. The words baby with Down syndrome. There were 2 babies at the time. And I was like, no, that's not. Like, why am I feeling drawn towards this? I've explained it before, like a spark in my heart, which is a hard idea for some people to understand. And then I said to Josh, hey, I just got this email. Isn't that weird? And I told him what it said. He's like, wow, I think we should pray about that. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think that we're not adopting a baby with Down syndrome. We had a week left in Europe and that was the focus of every conversation. Do we pursue this? Do we not? And having not talked to our social worker at all. And then when we got home, I called her that next morning and said, hey, we're actually interested in learning more. And she said, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known because we just yesterday placed one of the babies with the family and you guys would have been a great match. And then this other baby we just found out has some health issues that we don't have a lot of clarity on. So we're actually not looking at placement right now. And so I hung up the phone and thought, oh, that's weird. Josh and I just had a week in which we processed this idea of adopting a child with Down syndrome. There were 2, and now there's 0 available for adoption. And then we felt disappointment at not getting a child with Down syndrome. And we knew that a change had happened in our hearts. And then just to fast forward, that very, very sick baby was Mason. And we had found out for the first few weeks of her life, she came home just like nothing was wrong. No heart defect, nothing. And her foster mom had both of those babies with Down syndrome at the time, was doing a checkup for the other baby. And at that checkup, Mason projectile vomited. And the doctor said, does that happen a lot? And the foster mom's like, she does throw up a lot. But I just figured it was baby spitting up. And the doctor checked her heart and sent her from there to a specialist and is like, she has a major heart defect. She needs surgery soon. We didn't know that's happening because we don't know anything about this baby. And once that happened, within that week there, which is the week we were in Europe, they discovered all of her health issues and they were so severe at the time that they didn't know that she was going to live. And so they don't place babies who might not live in adoptive homes. They just stay in their foster home until they pass away. And then at 9 weeks old, she has a heart surgery that's not open heart. And then at 3 months old, we get the phone call that says, we have a better understanding about her health. And are you still interested in this baby?
Crazy. Well, and even to think about the email that you got, that she didn't have to mention anything about the 2 babies with Down syndrome. She could have just said, sorry, no action. Your profile has been viewed once. Hang in there. But the fact that she mentioned, but there are these 2 babies with Down syndrome that like planted that seed in your mind and the spark in your heart is just incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
We didn't know how much that extra chromosome would become an unexpected blessing. Ooh, it's a new normal.
was in me a desperation to be a mother. And I think if I were to have been in therapy at the time, that would have been something good to work through. Instead, it's come out over the years as a parent and with our other adoptions. But I was so desperate for a baby. I mean, desperate in my core. We really were very excited about a Down syndrome diagnosis, to be honest. We thought this is not something a lot of people get to do, to raise a child with Down syndrome. And it felt really lucky that we had that opportunity. And so Down syndrome is a back burner issue, but we're bringing home a baby with a congenital heart defect who is going to require open heart surgery at minimum a month after coming home. And then she was on oxygen 24/7, and she had all kinds of medication she took every day. And we were told her lung condition was exacerbated because of her heart, but it was also its own primary concern, and her heart would not fix it and it could last forever. So this is like in that time frame, what we're learning and having to say yes or no to. And I think also what's wild in an adoption is no is also an option. It's an okay and sometimes good and necessary answer. So the day she comes home, it was just so full of goodness and joy and beauty. And it was like this moment for me where I became a mom. And I have this memory forever etched in my mind of the room that we had in our home we knew for those 4 years would be the baby's room. We didn't do anything to it until we knew for sure Mason was coming home. So we had a weekend to get the room together because we were like back and forth. And then on a Friday it was, oh, she's going to come home on Monday. I'm like, it's that whole weekend. We just got the crib. We got everything in a weekend. And we had painted the walls these really bright colors and brown carpet. I just see like the visual of it, mostly this great like olive green old vintage chair in the corner. For years prior to that moment of her coming home, there's a mirrored closet in that bedroom. And I feel like a little embarrassed about this, but I would stand in front of the closet empty armed, like imagining myself with a baby in that space for so many years. And then when she came home, I remember bringing her into her room for the first time and holding her and seeing her in my arms. And it was just so good. I'm sure there's other more eloquent words, but it was just so good and sweet. And she completely changed our world. And I think it started in that moment when we brought her into our home. What happened was there was a lot lost in translation at her birth. I wasn't there, but my sense is her birth family, English is not their first language. They're Armenian. So whoever knew what happened maybe didn't tell the right people, because when she came home, we ended up looking through all her files and it was like, wait a second, how come we didn't know this? And I think the right people weren't told what was going on. And so we had this opportunity before we said yes to adopting her to meet with her cardiologist. And he was able to give us a clearer idea of the severity of it. And he let us know that it was very dire and that she was most likely not going to live past 8 years old. Ugh. And it was going to be like giving her quality of life care. I think it's tricky in the medical field because you have these incredible minds, these brilliant people who are saving lives every day, who are doing good work. And when it comes to infants and babies, a lot of it's a guessing game based on what they know. And people are determining a future for a 3-month-old. How can we say this is the future that this child's going to have? So we weren't getting a lot of medical training or advice. A lot landed with Google, which is not a great space to go to. It's overwhelming and wrong and not helpful. So we had plenty of moments because of our lack of preparation that felt real panicky. You know?
You bring this baby home. She has all of these medical needs. She was on oxygen all the time. Is that right?
Right. So she came home on oxygen just at night. And then 1 month later had her heart surgery. And at that surgery, her doctor said she needed to always be on oxygen from the day one for 24 hours a day. And it's just a miracle that she made it only at night. And so she came home from the hospital and she was on 24 hours a day. So we had that first month with just at night. And the very next day, which was our first full day as parents, we had a meeting with her heart surgeon to schedule her open heart surgery. And so we, wake up and pack up our brand new little baby and then go to the hospital and meet with this heart surgeon. And going in, I just thought, I don't want to just be another name in another family. Like, I want to be known. And I felt this need to have some kind of favor with relationship. And so we go in, we're talking to this heart surgeon. The head of the adoption agency has to be at all of our medical stuff until the adoption's finalized, because she's technically has the legal rights to make medical decisions for our daughter. Heart surgeon comes in. It's kind of like, you can tell a lot's going on. Not that he's ignoring us. He's just a heart surgeon, and he was meeting with us and then going into heart surgery. He gets on the phone and we hear him talking, and the words that we pick up on the phone are like, he's got to make it because the heart is there. So at the hospital, a helicopter had just delivered a heart and he was going to go do a heart transplant surgery after our meeting. And he hangs up the phone and we ask him the question. He goes, "Wait, I'm so sorry. Who are you?" To Josh and me. And we're like, "Oh, we adopted this baby. She's going to be our baby." And he was blown away. And I don't even know exactly what he said, but it was basically like, he just couldn't believe that we were going to adopt this baby. And
why?
We live in a world in which Down syndrome, heart defects, like, who will bring home and care for a 3-month-old baby with Down syndrome and a heart defect? That was the reason in which her family chose an adoption plan to begin with. I don't know. That's my assumption why he said that. I didn't ask him why in that moment. It was like a moment where he just like stopped and saw us, and then moving forward, it felt like we had more of a relationship with him. And it turns out that he shared the same faith as us. And from that moment to a month later, she had her surgery. He told us he had been praying for her. And right after surgery, we met with him as they're wheeling her from the OR into her hospital room. And he says, "I did all that I can do, and the rest is in the Lord's hands." And so it just felt like that favor that I had been wanting with the relationship with this man who had a deep love for our daughter.
Wow.
That entire day, and I don't over spiritualize things, and I love people that do. I don't say it to be dismissive of people who are very spiritual. That's just not how I lean. I'm very pragmatic. And the day was holy. It was marked by holiness and goodness outside of anything that we offered that day. And towards the end of Mason's hospital stay, the head of this agency had to be at all of our, every day she had to be there in case papers needed to be signed or something. And we're in the waiting room at one point, and she says, "I am not a spiritual person, but there's something that's occurred over these last few days that is spiritual and holy, and I don't know how to explain it." And she just said that to me out of the blue. And so we get chills talking about it. That was our experience in the hospital. For whatever reason, the Lord really just offered that to us.
When you say that the day was holy, is there like an example that comes to mind of like how you sensed that?
It was really more like an overall sensing. It was more like a peace that didn't make any sense. There was such a support from everybody involved. It was like this overall, we had people coming and going, family members and friends, and people from the adoption agency and social workers, and just this feeling of like unity and understanding and being known instead of fear. I think that what people would assume that when you're waiting for your child throughout open heart surgery, you would be feeling fear and nerves, and those weren't the emotions that I connect to that time at all.
Wow. Which kind of feels miraculous in itself.
Exactly. Yeah. It felt like a front row seat to a miracle.
I see a miracle right in front of me, a brilliant shining light, electricity, unexplainable, but I do believe you're a miracle with a heartbeat.
That first day coming home felt overwhelming. In the hospital, I was actually felt really surprised at how well Josh and I did, because you just don't know until you're in those situations how you're going to respond emotionally. And I felt really strong. Like, whoa, you hear about people going through this in their lives, but now it's my life and I'm doing it. And we're like holding it together really well. And so I felt that way throughout the whole hospital stay. And she comes home and there's no beeping machines and there's no nurses and there's no cardiologists roaming the halls. And it was just us. And she was only in the hospital for 4 days. And then we have all these medications to give her. So we just like had moved her bed downstairs. So we weren't going up and down with the oxygen. And we had set up this big whiteboard with days and times that we didn't over medicate her, and just getting her all set up. And I had this moment of all of that strength that I had felt. I just had to let it go. And maybe it was the time in the hospital, it was like adrenaline. And then I got to the point where I could no longer hold on like that. And my dad was there. My parents were helping us get set up. And I just like, my dad could tell, and he calls me Elizabeth is my middle name. So he's like, Elizabeth, what's up? Are you okay? And I just like melted into him and started sobbing and just said, I don't know if we can do this. Like, what if she dies? What if she dies today? What if in the next couple of days she dies? How do you do this? How do parents do this? And my dad just hugged me and said, every breath she's going to ever breathe has been accounted for. And there's nothing you can do that's going to change any of that. It was a moment that marked my life forever. It changed the way I parented that day forward. It continues to be a mantra in our home, and not in a foolish way. I think you could take that the opposite way, like a YOLO kind of idea. But
YOLO with your babies.
Right, exactly. But more of, okay, the truth of there's nothing that we can say or do that is going to put more time on the days that have been numbered for any of us, including our children. I find a lot of peace in that. I think people might find that a little bit terrifying, but for me, it offered me all of the peace I needed at that moment as I am caring for my daughter, who really could, at any moment, if we did it wrong, could have died.
I mean, I'm sure it was just frightening to lay her down to sleep and have all of these like tubes all over the place. And so what was that like?
In those 2.5 years with her on oxygen, we got used to it and we could do most of life normally, but it was such a hassle and it was annoying. But then there was also the health aspect, like you've got a baby and people say, you don't even put a blanket in your baby's crib. So we're not worried about stuffed animals. Like, we're laying her in her bed with plastic tubing wrapped around her face in her crib with her. So when she wasn't rolling over, it was one thing. But when she started rolling over, I got up many times a night to check on her. There were 2 times only, which is, I feel, miraculous. But it was terrifying when the tubing was wrapped around her neck more than once. And it was just moments where I just wept that I was so thankful that I got to her when I did. And it was also just a reminder. I mean, every night before I would go to bed, I'd get on my knees in front of her crib and I would pray that God would heal her body completely. I would pray that he'd heal her lungs and that he would keep her alive through the night and the tubing wouldn't wrap around her neck. That was just our reality. And then there's annoying things like we had to carry it everywhere we went. We went on a trip once just up to my parents' house, so not too far, but we had forgotten an extra tank. And so then you have to go and find the tank. And she had little rashes on her face from her cannula because it wouldn't stay in her nose. So we'd tape it to her cheeks. And yeah, it was a hassle. So then we go to the pulmonologist, and we had been going every 6 months. And every 6 months she would say, her numbers are the same. We'll see you in 6 months unless something comes up. That's what we were expecting on that day. It was December 10th, 2015.
I love that you remember the date.
That's amazing.
We don't forget these things. And we were actually, that night, we were hosting a Christmas party for my husband's work. He oversaw a team where he worked. And so for his team, we were hosting a Christmas party for everyone and their families. And we hustled over to the doctor, her pulmonologist, knowing that when we were coming home, like the house was already set for a party and we were going to have to throw food in the oven and things like that. And then this happens. We're just waiting, and she literally throws the door open and says, her pulmonary hypertension is gone. Take off her oxygen. And we just, I mean, it was like a movie. Like we just froze and stared at her. I felt like our jaws hit the floor. And she said, I told you to take off her oxygen. And like she was a little bit, a little spicy, this doctor. It's like, okay. So we take off her oxygen and we're just weeping and weeping and weeping. And she's like, okay, we've got to wait 30 minutes and we'll check her levels without her oxygen on for 30 minutes. And she still had to be on it at night because we had to wean her off. So for 6 months, she was on it at night at lower and lower dosages. We had this incredible community of people who had come alongside us through infertility, through bringing Mason home, through heart surgery.
Who was that community?
It was our family, both of our families. And we had a bunch of people from where my husband worked, coworkers. And we had a group of friends at the time that we had been getting together with once a week for dinner. There were probably 6 different couples or families that we had been friends with prior to kids, and then when Mason came home. So they all had shown up with meals throughout the years and gifts and support however they could. So we were just on the phone with people. I mean, she passed, the 30 minutes passed, her oxygen levels were good, and we weren't expecting to be there that additional 30 minutes. So now we're like rushing home because we're hosting a Christmas party and we're calling family, and everyone's just, what? I can't believe it. No one could believe it. We had a couple of friends who weren't a part of that work group, but just showed up on our doorsteps. Like, I know you're having a party, but we just had to come and give Mason a hug, and like jumping up and down, and we're just crying. And so it was just a miracle because it wasn't supposed to happen. You know, it wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a control freak?
I consider myself a recovered control freak. And partly because of Mason. I was totally a control freak going into my infertility. I think that was one of the hardest things for me with my infertility journey, is that I could not control the outcome no matter what I did. And then bringing Mason home, it was a lot of letting go of control. And I think one of the greatest gifts in raising children is having to let go of control. And one of the gifts in raising children with disabilities is even more so, that there's so much control that we have got to release if we're going to lean in to who our child is and lean into the way in which they respond to the world and embrace that as we help them grow to be their best selves.
Can I, side note, I have literally had chills almost our entire conversation. Hopefully there's not some like terrible medical side effect for that happening.
I'm sure not.
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing.
I just think like that take off her oxygen just reminds me of like Jesus stepping up to the man saying like, pick up your mat.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's so weird.
Right?
Totally.
And like, here's this guy who's been living day in and day out with this reality, and it's no longer a thing.
In all of these years, no one has ever brought that up, and it's a total parallel. Yeah.
And now I totally understand why she remembers that day, right?
Yes.
That's the kind of experience that you never, ever, 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 ever forget.
No.
Heather's family getting rid of the oxygen kind of reminds me of when you're cooking in the kitchen and you got the vent fan on and there's just this like loud noise that's just constantly running and running and running. And then we finally like sit down for the meal and we turn off the fan and all of a sudden there's peace and quiet. And you just kind of have the removal of that white noise and you're like, oh my gosh, we were existing in this completely different plane of experience. And now there's like this sense of peace
And relief.
Yeah, totally relief. Except times like a million.
Right, yes. It's time to go all the way back to the beginning of Heather's story. It begins as Heather and Josh got married back in 2002.
You know what I saw all the time as I was driving around in 2002?
Those like noodle guys with the flappy arms.
That I did see those guys, but I was actually thinking of those iconic iPod billboards where like the character was like a silhouette. Do you remember that? They were kind of psychedelic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing those billboards while I was driving in my 89 Honda Accord, proudly wearing my cargo pants.
Yes, that's right. Did you ever actually put stuff in your cargo pants with all those pockets?
Every once in a while I would put something in and then I would forget about it.
And then
I'd find it later.
Yeah,
you know?
It would go through the wash.
That's right.
And you'd be like, here's my Snickers bar.
Cargo pants. Unnecessary pockets on a necessary article of clothing.
Cargo pants. Solving a problem you never had.
I'm sure Josh had some cargo pants.
Maybe that's what made Heather fall in love with him.
She saw his cargo pants and was like, he is so hot. I wonder if he can carry my keys. Well, I think we've sufficiently covered needless pockets for the time being. Let's hear the rest of the beginning of Heather's story.
Let's hear the end of the show, which is actually the beginning
of the story.
Act 3, What It Means to Be Human. Heather always wanted to be a mother, but it was a much harder road to get there than she expected. This final act includes unmet expectations, a test gone wrong, and a family reunion. Let's hear from Heather.
I was 20 years old when we got married, and there was a plan. We get married, and then we're married for a few years, and then we have kids. And I was hoping to have 3 kids before I was 30, and we started trying to get pregnant. And within 6 months of not getting pregnant, I knew something was wrong, and everyone around you says it's only 6 months, like you've got to wait up to a year. But at that moment, the thought of waiting a year to have a baby, I mean, it was the worst thing I could imagine, that I had to actually wait a year to get pregnant. And then a year came and went, and then another year came and went, and we just started seeing doctors and talking to specialists, and, you know, everyone around you is like, eat this thing or try this thing or whatever. Tried all the things and couldn't get pregnant. And so every time we pursued trying to figure out why I wasn't able to get pregnant, it just opened up another door that revealed something happening in my body. And so we saw a fertility specialist, and then we tried this medication, and then we did this thing. And I ended up having something called a dye test done, which they shoot dye in your fallopian tubes to see if they're clear. And I had been told by so many people that often people get pregnant right after, because if there was any kind of blockage in their tubes, the dye pushes it out. And in that test, we were told that one of my fallopian tubes, my doctor explained it like a road to Big Bear. And this, where we live, Big Bear is a city way up in the mountains. So like a very windy road. Essentially, like this side doesn't work, but your other tube is clear. So you should be fine. And after that test, I got really, really sick about 2 days later. And I was one of a very small percentage, like less than 2% of the women who get this test done get an infection from it. And I was in and out of the emergency room. I was out of work for 2 weeks. I was so sick. And when all that was done, when I was well enough to go see my OBGYN, I went to this appointment, and I was expecting, I went alone because I wasn't expecting any kind of big news. I just went after work one day, and I remember, instead of being walked into an exam room, I was walked into his office, and that was surprising to me. And no one weighed me. Usually I would get weighed, and the nurse just said, "Come on in," and walked me into his office and said, "He'll be right there." And I thought, this is not what it's supposed to be. And then he came in and told me that what happened was you got an infection. It's a very small percentage of people who get this infection. Hearing how sick you were, it seems like the infection was severe, and most likely it left permanent damage to your reproductive organs. And I remember the room, like a movie, where it's like his mouth is moving, but I don't know what he's saying. I felt so shocked, and I wasn't ready for that news, because it did feel like we had been trying. There was always every roadblock was like, oh, but just jump over this wall and it'll get you there. Oh, just take this turn and it might work. And this was the like nail in the coffin, like your fertility is dead and you will not be able to have children naturally, period. So that was about 2.5 years into the process. And so that was a day that I feel like my infertility was stamped on me, like it was done and there was nothing we could do. And it was, it is a crushing thing to experience.
Who did you call first after you left that appointment?
I didn't call anyone. I happened to work at a high school at the time, and the school was just up the street from the doctor's office, maybe 5 blocks. So I had walked. So I walked back to my car in hysterics. Like I remember feeling embarrassed passing people on the sidewalk. And then I drove home and I just laid in my bed. And then Josh got home and I told him in person, but I didn't call anybody. I just have such a strong memory of laying on my bed and thinking I'm not getting up again. So, and then our dear friend Time, who can be a great friend sometimes and sometimes a great enemy, but Time as a friend stepped in, and Time offers us healing and perspective. And a few weeks went by, and even in those years of trying to get pregnant, I had started looking into adoption as this might be something that we're going to do. I had started looking at the difference between a domestic adoption and an international adoption. I was actually looking for the fastest way to get a baby. Like, what's my fastest option here? At the time, I didn't know anyone who had adopted. So this was over 13 years ago. And one of my coworkers, she said, my son has adopted 2 children from an agency here in Los Angeles. Would you like to talk to him? Because it was like, okay, so if we're going to adopt, what does that look like? What does that mean? How do you even do it? Is this something that is possible? So we had dinner with this family, and we show up at their house. We're strangers, and they invite us over for dinner, and we walk in, and they have these 2 rambunctious boys just running around the house. They were they were playing knights or something. They had like shields and swords, and they were just this family. And Josh and I left there like, that was just a family. And it didn't matter that they didn't look like each other and that they didn't share each other's DNA. They were just a family. And that was our goal. Our goal was, how do we become parents? And so we ended up leaving there like 100%, we're going to pursue an adoption plan, and went with the same agency that this couple had adopted from, because we just didn't know any other way to do it. So we start the process, and then we bring home Mason. And I have said this already, but my goal was to be a mom, and my goal in adopting, that was it. That was my initial thing. And I had this idea in my head because I had learned, you take classes, and it's a labor-intensive, time-consuming, emotional process, an adoption process as an adoptive parent. And in that process, I thought about me mostly. I have since learned a lot about adoption, and I have changed my tune significantly. And in an adoption, there is a triad that is adoptive family, adoptee, and birth family. And I didn't think of it in that way. I just thought about me and my baby, and how do I go get my baby and pick up my baby and bring my baby home? And maybe my ideal scenario was, of course, we want to know about the birth family because that's healthy for my baby. But maybe we'll send cards and letters. I don't want a relationship. I don't want this other person in my baby's life because this other person is choosing to not be this baby's parent. That was my initial thought in adoption. And then as we've adopted 2 more children, and with Mason, had a relationship with her birth family, I went into it resistant. And I'm so thankful for their grace and their love for our daughter and their love for us, and that we get to know them and have spent time with them over the years, just realizing that I had been fed a narrative in which I am the hero, I am the savior, I am the rescuer because I have adopted children. And there's no room in that narrative for my children. who are the adoptees. There's no room in that narrative for birth families, all of whom are equally, if not more so, affected by an adoption plan than me. And over the years, being able to understand that every adoption starts with tragedy. The best case scenario ever in an adoption is birth out of tragedy and brokenness. I am my kid's mom, and God has had his hand in all of this. However, this was never plan A. This was always plan B, because God is not a God who creates destruction. And so that's just lessons I've had to learn along the way as an adoptive parent, that God always wanted my kids to stay with their birth families. That's always plan A. And I'm plan B. And that's fine. You know, like that, I'm not threatened by that. It's the story. It's the story that there are women and grandparents and aunts and uncles who see my kids as their kids and their niece and nephew and their grandchildren. And that's not a threat. It's the story. And my kids as adoptees, they need that story, because their reality will always be one in which there is a woman who didn't choose them, who still loves them, who they still love. For Mason's second birthday, her birth mom called me and said, "Hey, we would like to throw Mason a birthday party." And I was not pumped about that idea at all, but I felt like, okay, we can do something. So they gave us a date and invited us to a park in their neighborhood. And I have mentioned that Mason's birth family is Armenian, and English is a second language for her biological mom and dad. There's some things lost in translation when we have conversations. So I didn't know what I was expecting or what to expect. And we show up at this park, and we only brought my dad, even though they said you can bring whoever you want. And we pull up on a barbecue party with there were 19 people there. And so it was her parents. She has a biological sister who's 18 months older than her. So her sister, her mom has 3 sisters. So the aunts were all there and their families and both sets of grandparents. And there we were. And, Mason's on oxygen. So there's also this in my head, I'm like, everyone needs to wash their hands. No one can touch her. But having to kind of let go of that. There was a moment where her paternal grandfather at the end of the day was sitting on a blanket with her, and she's got on her oxygen, and he's just sitting next to her smoking.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm thinking do I say something? No. Do I not? Do I say something? Do I not? It was such this weird tension, and we had a sweet moment with him because he spoke very, very limited English. He was quiet most of the time, or he didn't talk to Josh or me or my dad at all. And at the very end, he walked up to me and he put his hands on my shoulders and with tears in his eyes, and he just said, "We are family," and was crying. And I started crying and said, "We are." And Josh and I just left that party and drove home, and we're like, that was incredible. That was incredible. How could we not want this for her and for them and for us? And oh my gosh, if you can have a relationship with the birth family in a way that's healthy, have a relationship with the birth family. These people love Mason and we love Mason. So that's enough,
Ooh, it's a new normal, a different season, but the same old dream.
If Macy had never come into your life, who do you think you would be right now?
Honestly, I think we would be fine. I was a teacher. I'd probably just be teaching again. I don't know. Josh would be working for a church, and we would just be doing our life with our neurotypical, healthy children who look like me, and we would be fine. Fine is fine, but it's also, there's a sense of settling in that. And I'm not a person who settles, and I am a person who is looking for the sweetness in the unknown spaces. And so I think I'd be finding that somewhere else. And maybe at the end of it all, I would still end up adopting a child with Down syndrome or doing something in that area. I think maybe that could have been the story, that it would have come full circle anyway. Honestly, I think about Mason a lot had she not been our daughter. Oh, it makes me feel emotional. And I don't say this at all to make us as a hero, but I do see her family on social media. And Mason has needed a lot. And we live in a world in which immigrants who don't speak English have a much harder time at life. Mason would have been experiencing that injustice because her parents probably lacked a lot of what I had because I'm an English-speaking white woman in California, because they are immigrants who don't speak English. And so that injustice and how that would have unfolded in Mason's life, I don't know where she would be. And it wouldn't have been her parents' fault, you know?
Yeah.
What has changed inside of you? And like, who is the person that you are now who is different from the person who brought home Macy for the first time?
I think the biggest difference is I extend more grace to people, and I have learned how to see the good and the beauty in people and in brokenness and in overlooked situations. And I would credit that to bringing Mason home. She's turned so many corners for me, but the one that feels even more significant than her health is in being her mother, her shifting the idea of what it means to be human and what gives human value and worth. Why we pursue the things that we pursue has so much more to do with the fact that Mason has taught us the value of human life no matter what. If you are alive, your life is valuable. There's nothing we're going to attach to that. And that's such a radical idea in most societies, especially in a Western society. And so there was moments, and I think it really was around her heart surgery when she had just come home. And in those first couple months of looking at this child who the world had, I mean, really, she had been disposed of in a way. Like, she had been seen as who she was, and that was not good enough. And therefore, she was displaced. And the tragedy of that, and then that I get to come into that story, and then that she's shown me, there's so much beauty and worth in who she is, period, full stop. And so that turned a corner in my life in the way in which I perceive humans and the way in which I pursue basically everything in my life.
Oh, it's so good. Heather's story is such a great reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts of our lives come out of the deepest tragedies. Her fierce love for her children is a beautiful reflection of the way that God loves us.
And you love following her on Instagram, don't you, JJ?
I do. And even though she's mentioned her frustration with the platform, I think she navigates the space so well.
Yeah, it's a little bit of sunshine in your feed every day, right?
Yes, totally. So if you would like a little sunshine in your feed, follow her at The Lucky Few Official. Her family is seriously the cutest.
Well, in case you missed any of the details during the show, we're going to do a little recap, and we call it
Let's Rewind the Tape! Heather is an author, mother, and advocate for the Down syndrome and adoption communities.
Her platform was significantly helped along by a little dog with an overbite named Tuna.
But Tuna's owner couldn't have shared Heather's Instagram account if Heather hadn't adopted her daughter Macy,
who she only found out about because a social worker randomly mentioned 2 babies with Down syndrome
in an email one day in July of 2008. This episode of Instrumental was produced by me, JJ Heller.
And me, Dave Heller.
Our theme music is my song, Big Love, Small Moments,
that I helped write.
To find out more about me, listen to more of my songs, or watch my music videos, please visit jjheller.com. That's 2-letter J's, HELLER.com.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Instrumental.
So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.